They say legends are just stories with the boring parts cut out. But what if I told you this legend was real? A warrior so fierce, his enemies thought he was invincible. A man who once walked through a battlefield with arrows stuck in his helmet like porcupine quills, and didn't even flinch. This isn't a myth. This is the true story of Honda Tadakatsu, the samurai who took 900 heads in a single battle and never lost a fight in his life. In the chaos of Japan's blood-soaked Sengoku period, where samurai clans fought for power, land, and honor, there was one name whispered with awe on every battlefield: Honda Tadakatsu. The man was a walking nightmare in armor, not because of what he said, but because of what he did. While most samurai hoped to survive a single battle, Tadakatsu wasn't just surviving. He was racking up bodies like it was a game. Some say he killed 900 men in one fight. That sounds like movie-level madness, right? But stay with me, because once you understand the era he lived in, the wars he fought, and the reputation he earned, you'll see why people thought he wasn't even human. This is the story of a man who turned into a myth, a warrior so perfect. He was called the samurai without equal. And no, that's not just a cool nickname. That was a title earned in the most violent way imaginable. But before we see Tadakatsu's killing spree at the Battle of Komaki-Nagakute, we need to understand where he came from and why he became one of the most terrifying warriors in Japan's history. Let's rewind to 1548. That's the year Honda Tadakatsu was born in Mikawa province, in central Japan. Now, Japan in the 1500s wasn't exactly peaceful. This was the middle of the Sengoku Jidai, a time when every samurai warlord and their cousin was trying to become the next shogun. Think of it like Game of Thrones, but with way more swords, honor codes, and beheadings. Tadakatsu was born into the Honda family, a samurai clan that served the powerful Tokugawa Ieyasu. Ieyasu would later become the guy who unified Japan and created the Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled for 250 years. But back in the 1550s and 60s, he was just another ambitious warlord trying to claw his way to the top. And Tadakatsu? He became his right-hand blade. As a young samurai, Tadakatsu stood out, not just because he was tall and strong, which he was, but because of the way he fought. He didn't just fight to win, he fought to dominate. There's a saying in Japan, Tadakatsu was a man among men, not a soldier, a force of nature, and the more he fought, the more people noticed. One of the earliest signs that Tadakatsu was not your average samurai came at the Battle of Komaki-Nagakute in 1573. Here's the setup. Tokugawa Ieyasu's forces were getting wrecked by the legendary General Takeda Shingen. Ieyasu had to retreat fast or die. Most samurai in that situation would just run. Tadakatsu? He charged into the enemy and started cutting down soldiers like weeds, buying time for Ieyasu to escape. Imagine the chaos. Arrows flying, swords clashing, men screaming, and in the middle of it all, a lone warrior in a horned helmet, refusing to back down. It wasn't just bravery, it was borderline insane. But it worked. Ieyasu survived, and Tadakatsu's reputation exploded. From then on, people started whispering, "That man can't be killed." But the legend really exploded during the Battle of Komaki-Nagakute in 1584. This was the big one, the battle that would define Tadakatsu's myth. Quick context. After Oda Nobunaga was assassinated, a power struggle erupted between Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's former general, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Hideyoshi wanted to rule Japan. Ieyasu wasn't having it, so they met in battle. Tadakatsu led a shock cavalry unit, charging directly into the enemy ranks. Not just once, but over and over again. And here's where it gets crazy. Eyewitnesses say that Tadakatsu personally beheaded over 900 men during this campaign. 900. That's not just a high score. That's unreal. And unlike most warriors who get injured or die doing this kind of thing, Tadakatsu walked away without a scratch. One story says his helmet had so many arrows sticking out of it, he looked like a porcupine. But he was still standing, still swinging his spear, Tonbogiri, the dragonfly cutter. Why was it called that? Because legend says it was so sharp that a dragonfly landed on the blade and was cut in half just by touching it. I know, sounds like a fairy tale, but that's the thing about Tadakatsu. Everything about him sounds made up. And yet, every warlord, every general, and every samurai who fought with him told the same story. He never lost. He never got injured. He never even broke a sweat. Let's pause for a second. How does a man like this even exist? Was Tadakatsu just lucky? Was he smarter than everyone else? Or was there something deeper? Something almost unnatural? Here's the problem. The more we learn about him, the more confusing it gets. We have dozens of records about his battles. Every single one says the same thing. Tadakatsu was always on the front lines, always the first to charge, and always the last one standing. That's not luck. That's something else. Some say it was his armor, custom-made, thick as hell, and terrifying to look at. Others say it was his training, endless hours of spear drills, horseback combat, and swordplay. But maybe, just maybe, it was his mind. Tadakatsu didn't just train harder. He believed harder. He believed that fear was the enemy, that hesitation was death, that a real warrior doesn't fight for glory. He fights for his lord, no matter what. And that belief made him untouchable. There's one moment that captures the essence of Tadakatsu better than any other. During the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, the biggest and bloodiest fight in Japan's history, Tadakatsu was already in his 50s. That's old for a samurai. Most men his age were either dead or retired. But Tadakatsu, he mounted his horse, grabbed his dragonfly cutter, and rode straight into hell one more time. He didn't have to. He could have stayed back. But honor wouldn't let him. He led the charge through a field so drenched in blood, the horses were slipping. He took hit after hit, and still didn't fall. After the battle, the enemy commanders looked at the dead and injured, and they asked, "Where's Honda Tadakatsu?" The answer? He walked off the battlefield. Again, after Sekigahara, Tokugawa Ieyasu finally unified Japan. He became the first shogun of the Tokugawa dynasty, ruling a peaceful Japan that lasted for centuries. And beside him, as always, was Tadakatsu. But here's the twist. Despite all his victories, Tadakatsu never bragged. He never demanded power. He didn't even want land. He just asked to serve. In a world filled with ambition, betrayal, and backstabbing that made him even more rare. He finally retired in 1609 and died in 1610 at the age of 62. And to this day, there's no record of him ever being defeated in battle. Let that sink in. Over 4 decades of non-stop war, hundreds of battles, 0 defeats. That's not just impressive. That's legendary. Honda Tadakatsu wasn't a myth. He was a man, but he fought so well, so fearlessly, and so often that people stopped thinking of him as human. Even his enemies respected him. One of them once said, "In the presence of Tadakatsu, death itself retreats." And honestly, they might have been right, because while most samurai are remembered for a single moment, Tadakatsu's whole life was a moment. He was the storm on the battlefield, the blade that never broke, the warrior who made death wait its turn. And that's why, even today, more than 400 years later, his name still echoes through the pages of history. So the next time someone tells you legends aren't real, tell them about Honda Tadakatsu.